"Max, son, I'm here," Patrick Weddle shouted to his son. The schoolyard was full of chattering children. They chatted endlessly with each other, recounting and discussing the brightest moments of the school day. The bright blue uniform and almost indistinguishable leather bags made the children alike, spellcog, to such an extent that Patrick could not always immediately determine where his son was among the sea of first graders. "Hi, Dad," exclaimed the little boy, joyfully running up to his father. Patrick lifted him up onto his shoulder with one arm and took his bag with the other. "Why are you so heavy today? Do they feed you well in the cafeteria?" "Yes, of course, Dad," the boy replied, laughing. "I think I'm growing faster and getting stronger every day. Soon I'll be just like you." In turn, the father chuckled good-naturedly. "No, son, wait, please don't grow up so fast. Believe me, if I were in your place right now, I wouldn't even think about becoming an adult." "Our lives are so dull," Patrick groaned a bit, pretending to envy his little son, who was enjoying perhaps the brightest days of his childhood. Max laughed happily again. He loved riding on his father's shoulders so much. "Tell me, how was your day?" asked the man. "How do you like your new teacher? Does she explain well?" "Okay," replied the boy over his father's shoulder. "She is stricter than Mrs. Davis, but I think we can come to an agreement with her. I heard that Mrs. Eganberg loves chocolate candies, so we decided to bring her a box on Monday." "Hey, son, that's more like a bribe," smiled his father. "You better wait for Teacher Appreciation Day, then you can give her a gift." Patrick was raising his son alone. He worked as a paramedic in an ambulance, and he was overjoyed that his beloved son had finally gone to school. If before he always worried about Max and how he was feeling, while Patrick himself worked 2 shifts to provide the boy with everything he needed, now he could at least breathe a little. After all, for most of the day his child was under the supervision of teachers, fed and busy with useful things. Max had only recently entered the 1st grade. Only 3 months had passed since the boy first took his pencil case and textbooks out of his bag and put them on his desk. And yet, Patrick continued to ask him every day if he liked school, if he had made new friends, if he had quarreled with anyone, and so on. His previous teacher had just gone on maternity leave a week ago, and Patrick was anxious to see if the new teacher could find a common language with his son. Fortunately for almost all school teachers, Patrick was a true example of how to raise a child if you are their only parent. "I wonder what happened there," mused one of the teachers. "It seems like someone among the kids said that Max's mom left them when the boy was still a baby." "Well, girls, that's none of our business," abruptly cut off the physical education teacher. "Who knows what happened to anyone in the past? The fact is that, in our difficult times, raising a child alone is quite an achievement for a man. And by the way, he works as a paramedic in an ambulance. He probably has constant overloads, and yet he manages to pay enough attention to his son. What a father." The most surprising thing about this whole story was that Max was not Patrick's biological son. The man saved the baby when he was just a year old. The child and his mother were involved in a terrible car accident. Patrick remembered that terrible trip for the rest of his life. The old, long-seen Buick, which was only suitable for the dump, for some reason lost control right in the middle of a busy highway. The female driver desperately tried to hold the steering wheel. As the police later said, however, she failed. The woman's car was taken to the oncoming lane, after which it was instantly caught under the wheels of a huge truck. The baby survived only by a miracle. When the rescuers were finally able to cut off the roof of the car, Patrick saw that there was a small cradle securely attached to the rear seat in which a 1-year-old baby was desperately wriggling and screaming. "Oh my goodness," Patrick could only whisper, seeing the child and his bleeding mother. Julia, the unfortunate young woman, weakly moaned and tried to keep the blood from pouring from a huge torn wound on her thigh. "The femoral artery is damaged," Patrick shouted to his assistant at the time. "She needs to be released from this iron trap, urgently." Together with the rescuers, Patrick helped free the lower half of the woman's body from the steel clutches of the partially crushed car. Due to the shock, Julia was conscious all this time. However, further assistance unfortunately did not help. In a short time, the victim lost too much blood, and the paramedics did not have time to take her to the hospital. "My child, my Max," she whispered, using her last strength to appeal to the ambulance doctors. "Please don't let him die." "Calm down, please," Patrick replied, understanding that his words were more for comfort than encouragement. "Everything was bad. Your child is alive and hardly injured. We'll arrive at the hospital soon. You'll have surgery and you'll be with your Max again." "No, I know I'm going to die soon. I'm ready for it. But my son promised me you won't let him die." Julia's chest rose for the last time. Then she let out a convulsive sigh and fell silent forever. "We did everything we could," the second paramedic said sadly, then looked at his wristwatch and quickly said, "Time of death, 12:05. "All right, Patrick, don't worry like that. I understand that losing a patient is always difficult. Believe me, we all feel the same way. Now all that remains is to pray that her little boy can handle this terrible turn in life." "Yes, I understand all that," answered Patrick. However, in his heart, it was as if huge black gates had opened, releasing coldness and emptiness. Patrick had been working for 5 years, and no one had ever died on his shift. The man always fought for his patients until the end, no matter how difficult the situation. But Julia became the first person to literally die in his arms, even if it was in an ambulance. Patrick glanced at little Max, who was held in the arms of the nurse in the front seat. The man's heart was filled with sorrow for the little boy left without a mother. He himself could not say exactly where he got this strange feeling, as if it were he who had to take care of the son of his deceased patient. Patrick had been married for nearly 4 years, but his wife Kristen refused to even consider having children. "I'm too young to think about having kids, and what will become of my figure?" "You don't think I'm going to give up my career as a ballerina just because you feel like playing with a little living thing? If you really want to show some care, show it to me. We haven't been to the sea for 2 years, and you promised me a fur coat. Look, all the girls at the theater are laughing at me." Kristen worked at the theater as a dancer in the corps de ballet, although Patrick sincerely believed that his wife's achievements in academic dance were quite modest. Kristen thought she was the future Marie Tallchief, which caused serious arguments between them. Patrick loved his wife sincerely, but he wanted to have a full-fledged family, while Kristen was solely focused on her career. "Kristen, dear," her husband tried to persuade her, "you know I've always been your biggest fan. But isn't it time to face the truth and understand that it's better for you to give up these attempts to build a career in the theater? You know, I'm genuinely happy that you're so supportive of your art, but you're not 18 anymore, not even 20. And so what?" his wife protested loudly. "You're suggesting I give up everything and stay home like some broody hen? And what about Isadora Duncan and the other ballerinas who succeeded even though no one believed in them in the beginning of their careers? Even their loved ones behaved as you do now. Kristen, you're not Isadora. Her husband couldn't take it anymore. And you're not Tallchief. And forgive me, you'll never be like them. You're already 27 and I'm 30. We're adults who got married to start a family. Do you understand? A family not like this, where the husband tries to earn money from morning until night and the wife stays at the theater day and night." "Patrick, how dare you?" his wife protested. "I'm a ballerina, a child of the air and light, and you'll never understand that." With these words, Kristen always demonstratively threw herself on the bed, wringing her hands and wept inconsolably. She used to do it so masterfully that Patrick had only to put up with her relentless desire to become famous in the field of ballet. However, he had tried different ways to approach the issue. He hinted at her teaching and suggested that if she couldn't make it in ballet, their charming daughter could fulfill her mother's dreams. But it was all in vain. Patrick seemed to be talking to a stone wall that cared about nothing but itself. On the day they took little Max to the hospital, Patrick knew he had to help him somehow. When he later learned that the boy had no family left, as his mother had grown up in an orphanage and never knew her parents, the man decided to adopt Max, even against his wife's protests. "Have you completely lost your mind?" "I don't understand you," Kristen said. "Why did you make the decision for both of us, and behind my back?" What if I don't want to raise this child? Did you ever think of that? After all, I don't have time for this. Kristen, that's enough. Patrick slammed his fist on the table. I'm tired of having to adjust my entire life to your stupid desires. You're my wife, and it's time for you to give birth to our child. And if you don't want to ruin your figure, then we'll adopt Max. I have already prepared all the necessary documents. We'll have no problem getting guardianship. That's how you talk? You want to burden me with someone else's child? You're a great husband, no doubt, said the young woman, crossing her arms over her chest and scowling. Kristen, you're saying that because you haven't seen him yet, he tried to explain more gently. When you see this little baby, I'm sure you'll love him like your own right away. I'm offering you a real life, a real family. Don't you want that? Even for me? Okay, but keep in mind that this child will be on you, got it? I'm not going to participate in this circus. God, I should have left you a long time ago. You're completely obsessed with your theme of children lately. And what do you suggest? Give the poor baby to an orphanage? Aren't you ashamed to even think of such a thing? His mother was from an orphanage. It's the worst fate for a child. What could be worse? Patrick tried to reason with his wife. Patrick, you should have gone to the theater as an actor. She rolled her eyes. So what if he grows up in an orphanage? Thousands of kids grow up like that and nothing happens. Then they become decent people. It's not the 19th century. Nobody is whipping them there. Kristen stopped in the middle of her sentence because she caught her husband's gaze. She had never seen so much icy anger and determination in his eyes before. That's it, Kristen. The issue is closed. We're adopting the boy and we'll raise him together. Period. Kristen was initially afraid, but then she just sneered at him. Well, since you've decided that way, saying this, she silently left the room. All further actions regarding the adoption of the boy went quickly, and just a month later, Patrick and Kristen were already considered Max's official guardians. However, Patrick's wife openly disliked her foster son. Everything related to taking care of the boy fell entirely on Patrick's shoulders. Kristen didn't approach Max when he cried. She approached him only after a scandal with her husband, who sometimes couldn't even stand after work, so exhausted he was. She didn't prepare his formula, nor did she take him for walks. Instead, she preferred to spend all her time on suddenly frequent ballet classes and at the theater. Honestly, her goal was to turn her husband's life into a real hell. So he couldn't bear it and gave the little boy back to the orphanage. However, Patrick quickly understood Kristen's cunning strategy and only then finally realized that he had chosen completely the wrong person as his life partner. 6 months later, their relationship finally cracked. The spouses almost stopped talking. Patrick had to bear twice as much, as he had no one to share his grievances and heartache with. His father died 2 years ago and his mother died when he was only 16. At work, he never admitted what a difficult person his wife was all this time. It was too shameful to talk about it, because he had always praised her in the eyes of his colleagues, and Zemfambatter positioned her as an extremely creative and vulnerable person. As it turned out, Kristen didn't waste any time either, and found herself a new admirer who apparently appreciated her uncomplicated dancing skills. She began openly dating a certain businessman behind her husband's back, and later confessed everything to him. With pride, she demanded a divorce. As you can see, she said then, there are still real men in the world who value beauty and women in their lives, primarily the sense of beauty. That lightness and grace of spirit that only a real muse can offer. Kristen, oh my God, do you hear yourself? Patrick asked her, incredulously rocking little Max in his arms. What nonsense are you talking about? What muse? Have you completely lost your mind with this vulgar passion? That's you, a vulgar, down-to-earth person who is only fit to save unknown people all his life on his miserable ambulance. While Graham is the most talented businessman, he will turn me into a real star, as you'll see. I just came for my things. I'll send you the divorce papers through a lawyer. Ciao. Sending her ex-husband an air kiss, Kristen went to the bedroom to pack the necessary outfits for her trip. Her new admirer promised to take her to Paris, so Kristen was full of brilliant plans and hopes regarding this romance. Patrick did not particularly resist the divorce. He had long realized that there was nothing left between them that would bind them together. And, as bitter as it was for him to admit it, not even to himself, probably nothing had ever bound them together. He honestly wanted to create his own big and loving family, and the young shy ballerina seemed to him to be the perfect option at that moment. After the divorce, Patrick surprisingly felt relieved. He felt much better and freer. Max became much calmer than before. The main source of stress in his new life, his wayward foster mother, was gone forever. Patrick no longer had to worry about her not feeding the baby or forgetting to take him for a walk. That day, Patrick and Max came home in a great mood. Patrick found out that Max liked his new teacher, which reassured him. The father sincerely worried about his son's relationships with his teachers. After all, school is not a kindergarten. It's much more serious. Even though it's only the first grade, all the kids are still little. "Well, do you want to eat?" Patrick asked his son cheerfully. "Of course, I'm literally starving," the little one replied, laughing. "Food at home is always tastier." The father just smiled. He was pleased to hear his son praise his own cooking. Patrick tried to improve his cooking skills every year by reading culinary books and watching numerous TV shows. "Well then, you'll definitely appreciate my dish today," Patrick said mysteriously, winking at his son. "What is it?" Max clapped his hands in anticipation. "This is pea soup with bacon and also blueberry pie," Patrick said with all the aplomb he was capable of, stepping away from the stove and showing his son a large pot of fragrant broth and a beautifully sliced pie on a plate. "Ow," the boy exclaimed sincerely. "I can't wait to try it." To father's great joy, the child happily ate a whole bowl of soup and a piece of pie. After that, Max rested a little, watched cartoons, and then was about to start working on his homework when a surprised exclamation came from his room. "Dad," his son called. "I think I'm in trouble." "What's wrong?" Patrick asked anxiously, entering the room. The boy showed his father a school bag. "These aren't my things," the boy said, blushing. "What do you mean they're not yours?" his father frowned. "I think I accidentally took someone else's school bag instead of mine. I didn't do it purposely, I swear," the boy said, folding his hands in a gesture of apology. The father hurried to reassure him. He knew that little children are still quite disoriented in space, so they can easily confuse each other's things. Especially in the first months of school, everything seems similar to them, including the uniform and almost identical school bags. "It's okay, Max, don't worry. Just please be more careful next time when you're taking your things, okay?" Patrick asked. "Of course, Dad, I'm sorry," his son reassured him. "But how am I going to do my homework now?" In response to this, Patrick smiled and said, "You'll make it in a clean notebook, and tomorrow, let's show the teacher everything and explain the situation. Let's see, what was the last thing you were assigned in school diary? The owner of this portfolio must have a diary and textbooks too." "You're a genius, Dad," the boy exclaimed sincerely. Then there was a beautifully designed pink diary with an image of a shimmering fairy pony. "Oh, so this is Amy Robbins' school bag," the boy exclaimed, then slapped himself on the forehead. "Of course, we sat together in our environmental studies class. She was speaking with other girls, and I was putting everything in my school bag when Tommy Nelson distracted me. I must have taken her school bag by mistake." "Well, we figured it out," Patrick nodded and carefully took out all of the girl's necessary textbooks from her school bag. "Now get to work. Just be careful. These are her things." His son assured him that everything would be fine, but Patrick had no doubt about that. Max had always been responsible and very proper at the age of 7, so he already had an idea of other people's property and how to handle it carefully. Suddenly, his father's attention was drawn to something sticking out of the inner pocket of the portfolio. It was a corner of a small photograph that the girl apparently kept inside her pocket of her bag as a talisman. Pulling on the smooth corner of the photo, Patrick easily pulled it out, but in the next second he froze as if struck by a powerful electric current. The photo showed Julia, the same woman who died in a car accident under the wheels of a huge truck. But how? How was that possible? Patrick looked closely at the face in the picture. There could be no doubt the same blue eyes, the same wavy ash blonde hair. Only the hairstyle in Julia's mysterious photo was somewhat different, but everything else. Of course, Patrick could be wrong. So many years had passed. However, the face of the person who had died, practically in his hands, would inevitably be etched into his memory. And besides, he always had a photographic memory for faces. Turning over the photo, the man was even more surprised. Judging by the date, the photo was taken a year and a half ago. That is, it could not possibly belong to Max's deceased mother. But then who was this mysterious stranger? "Dad, are you okay?" his son asked him. "Why do you look so scary?" No, everything's fine, Max," the man hurriedly reassured his son, at the same time hiding the photo in his pocket. "Probably my head just got dizzy. Sometimes it happens to adults. It will pass by itself." Poor Daddy. Max touched his father's forehead with his little hand and shook his head disapprovingly. "You're always tired at work, so you'll get sick sooner or later." Patrick just smiled gently. The attempt of his son to show care was so charming that the doctor realized once again that he could not even imagine what his life would be like without Max. Sometimes the young doctor felt that the child, despite his young age, understood this world much more than he could tell about it. The next day, Patrick asked his son to show Amy in the schoolyard so he could return her school bag. Max nodded, and soon the father was talking to a girl with long brown braids. "Thank you for returning my school bag to me." Amy politely thanked him, handing Max's bag back to him. "Yesterday, when I saw Max's things instead of mine, I didn't know what to do. I even cried. I didn't know how I was going to do my homework now." The man smiled kindly at her and said, "Don't worry, Max and I took care of your books, and look what I found." Patrick pulled out a photo from his pocket, the same mysterious woman. "Sorry, I found it accidentally in your school bag when we were taking out textbooks," he explained carefully. "She's a very beautiful woman. Is she your relative?" The girl took the photo from Patrick's hands and a pleasant smile appeared on her face. However, in the next second, she looked at him with clear suspicion. "That's my mum," Amy answered shortly, "and she actually forbids me to talk to strangers." Patrick felt a wave of complete amazement rise inside him. "Your mother is right, but I'm not really a stranger," Patrick replied with a slightly bewildered tone. He still couldn't come to terms with what he had heard. "I'm Max Weddle, Max's dad. You don't have to be afraid of me. I just wanted to know if your mum would come for you after school, or maybe dad." Amy's face became impervious for a moment, as if she didn't want to talk more about her family. However, being a very well-mannered child, the girl evasively answered, "Mum is unlikely to come today. Lately, Mario has been taking me back and forth to school." This information finally plunged Patrick into an emotional impasse. Could it be that Max's mother did have relatives after all? But he remembered very well that Julia was an orphan. Then how can one explain that Amy's mother looks exactly like her? And who is this Mario who comes for the girl? However, this time Patrick was too shy to ask Amy more about her family. Besides, school lessons were about to begin, and it would be better not to be late. However, the next day, he couldn't get this story about Amy's mother out of his head. The man thought it was unfair that his adopted son didn't even suspect the possible existence of his blood relatives. Who knows? Maybe he'll see his grandma and grandpa. Patrick blamed himself that for all these years, he didn't bother to check all the information about Julia's relatives, thus depriving his boy of possibly one of the happiest moments of his life. Tortured by guilt, Patrick decided to talk to Amy or her mother again if she came to pick up her daughter from school. Arriving at the end of classes, he saw a huge SUV of quite impressive size approaching the educational institution. A tall, athletic-built man jumped out of the car, looking like some kind of boss. The expensive business suit, although it fit him very well, still looked as if this person put it on more to create a corresponding impression about himself, rather than because it was actually comfortable for him. After a few minutes, Patrick saw Amy approaching the man's SUV. Obviously, this is the Mario that the girl was talking about, he thought to himself, and risked approaching the owner of the prestigious car. "Good day," Patrick politely greeted. "Excuse me, I really need to talk to you." "What do you want?" "What do you want, man?" The man surprisingly rudely replied, "Can't you see I'm picking up my kid from school? I don't have time for you right now." Patrick was surprised by the rude conversation style of this stranger. businessman, however, he tried to remain composed. You see, our children recently mixed up their school bags, and in Amy's, I accidentally found a photo of her mother. I wanted to know about her because many years ago. The man stopped listening and turned to Amy, demanded in the same manner that Amy get in the car and sit there quietly. Then he turned to Patrick and, taking a few steps toward him, literally hung over him. Hey, you, why are you attached to my family? I suggest you leave here nicely right now and never come near my daughter again. Do you understand? And keep in mind, you better not anger me again. Otherwise, I can't even complain about you. I'll say that you're hitting on my Amy, and then no one will bother to understand what and how. They'll call the police and they'll lock you up for about 15 years. Well, am I clear? Shocked by such rude behavior, Patrick nevertheless decided that he was probably wrong to bother strangers by meddling in their business. However, he was not going to humiliate himself in front of this strange guy either. I understand you, Patrick replied, sweeping Mario's hand off his chest. Just keep your hands to yourself. What did you say? The brazen man stretched out and, quickly looking around unnoticed, pushed Patrick with his stone shoulder. Stay away from us and your neck will be intact, he added, and then with an important look sat behind the wheel of his car. Patrick looked at Amy through the half-tinted glass. For a split second it seemed to him that fear flashed in her eyes. Only the girl quickly turned away from the window, pretending to be interested in something in her own school bag. Patrick liked the whole story less and less. Also, his intuition loudly suggested to him that Amy could not be this Mario's daughter. A month later, Patrick noticed that Amy was still being picked up by the SUV with the unpleasant businessman. The man could only guess where the girl's mother was in this case, and then one day Patrick saw how Mario, without hesitation, publicly began to shout at the child. How many times have I told you? You have to wait for me at the gate so I can pick you up, and we can leave immediately. And where have you been wasting so much time again? Don't shout at me, please. Amy timidly sighed, tears welling up in her eyes. I just went to chat with the girls, but it was only for a minute. A minute, you little idiot? Because of you and your minute, I'm now late for an important meeting. The man exclaimed angrily. Serious people are waiting for me. What am I supposed to tell them now? Look at me when I'm talking to you. The businessman roughly yanked Amy's arm and she began to cry softly, wiping her reddened eyes and tear-wet face with her little fist. Please don't shout at me, please. Instead of answering, Mario pulled the child again, making the little girl bend down in front of him. He whispered something in her ear, which made Amy abruptly stop talking and look at her guardian with an expression of undisguised horror on her face. Only God knew how much Patrick's hands itched at that moment. He wanted nothing more than to jump out of his own car and teach this scoundrel a lesson. The man had practically raised his hand against the child. At the same time, he understood perfectly well that openly confronting this scoundrel now would only harm the unfortunate little girl even more. Who knows what this brute had in mind? At that moment, bitter as it was for Patrick to admit, he couldn't take such a risk. He was finally convinced that there was definitely something fishy about this story. Patrick decided to take a different approach. The next morning, when he was seeing his son off to school, he quietly stopped Amy when there was no threatening car nearby and delicately asked, Amy, wait a minute, please. Did you have a fight with Mario yesterday? Sorry, I just saw how strangely he was acting towards you. Amy turned pale as if she had seen a ghost and then quickly shook her head so that her braids literally flew around her thin face. No, Mr. Weddle, you must have been mistaken. Are you certain? Patrick frowned. Yes, the girl nodded, but from her eyes the man guessed that he was right. It was my fault. He always asks me to leave through the main exit, but That's no reason to shout at you like that. But that's no reason to shout at you like that. Patrick protested in a low voice. You know, Max and I have different situations too, but I never allow myself to treat him like that. It's just wrong, to be honest. Instead of answering, Amy just lowered her big light blue eyes. Amy, but still, where is your mum? Patrick tried to ask his main question again. She's at home, but she can't go anywhere right now, the child evasively replied, cautiously looking around as if someone could overhear them. Patrick frowned again. Well, at least the situation has started to clear up a bit. Amy, do you or your mother need any help? Patrick asked carefully, hoping that the girl would understand him correctly. I could come over to your place this weekend. Max and you could play together. Of course, that is, if your mom and Mario allow it. At the mention of Mario, fear once again froze in little Amy's eyes. No, thank you, nothing is needed, she quickly replied, then added, Sorry, Mr. Weddle, I already have to go to class. The bell will ring soon. Amy ran off towards the school, leaving Patrick alone to ponder the information he had just received. In the end, he decided to figure things out on his own. Patrick told the class teacher that Max and Amy seemed to have mixed up the school bags again, and it would be better if he and Max stopped by on their way and resolved the matter. The teacher gave the right address, and Patrick went straight to it. In his happiness, the owner of the beautiful mansion was not at home at the moment. Patrick determined this by the absence of his massive SUV next to the entrance gate. Amy opened the door for him. Hello, Amy, Patrick said encouragingly. I was just passing by and decided to visit you and see how your mom is doing. Amy carefully looked out from behind the guest's back and, making sure that her guardian's car was nowhere to be seen, let him inside. Please come in, the girl said politely. My mother is lying in her room right now. She's very sick. Patrick followed her and saw a pale and very thin woman lying on a high bed in front of him. Nevertheless, the man's amazing guess was confirmed. Amy's mother was an exact copy of Julia, the biological mother of his adopted son, Max. He understood that such a coincidence could not be just a chance. Good evening, he said, entering the room. My name is Patrick Waddle. I am the father of your daughter's classmate, Max. Hello, Amy's mother said weakly. I am pleased to meet you. Amy has told me a lot about Max, and about you too. My name is Lisa Robbins. I'm sorry I can't offer you any tea because I've been feeling worse and worse lately. I'm afraid I don't have much time left. The woman closed her tired eyelids and sighed spasmodically. I'll go put the kettle on, Mummy, said little Amy, looking at her mother first, then at the man, and left the room. You are raising a beautiful daughter. Patrick sincerely praised the girl. I'm overjoyed that they became friends with my Max. Amy is so focused, serious, just what is needed to ground my little dreamer. A weak smile appeared on Lisa's face. She was pleased to hear good things about her daughter. Thank you, the woman replied. Yes, Amy has always been like that since childhood. I'm raising her alone. My parents and husband, they died 6 years ago. They were flying on a business trip to Hong Kong. Their private plane crashed. Later, rescuers were able to find only the approximate location on the map where the plane with my loved ones sank in the ocean. Lisa brought her hand to her face and wiped away a small tear that rolled down her cheek. Amy and I just happened to stay at home. My daughter got very sick. That's why we didn't fly anywhere. Who knew it would turn out like this? Lisa sobbed. If you only knew how much I miss them, especially now when I am possibly... The woman did not finish her sentence and buried her face in her hands. I beg you don't cry, Patrick said, trying to comfort Lisa. I apologize for the delicate question, but may I ask what your diagnosis is? Lisa looked at the man with a slightly puzzled expression. It's all right. I'm also a paramedic, the guest explained. The thing is, Amy told me about your condition. That's why I came. Maybe I can help you with something. Patrick noticed that there was almost no medicines on the table next to the patient, only a glass of cold tea and a box of some herbal mixture. This seemed strange because Lisa had enough money, judging by her luxurious house, to provide herself with full-fledged treatment for any illness, even the most severe. I don't think you can help me in any way, Lisa said, shaking her head. Mario already brought one doctor to me. After the examination, he diagnosed me with inoperable cancer. The only thing I can be happy about is that Amy got enough of the inheritance to live. Mario promised to look after her. How brave she was to say goodbye to life, being confident that her daughter would be properly cared for, Patrick thought. He simply could not let this woman die, especially like this. What the hell is going on here? Suddenly a wild roar was heard behind the door. Oh, Mario, you've come, Lisa exclaimed, putting her hand on the blanket. Mario, this is Patrick, the father of our Amy's classmate. Here, he came to visit me. He is also a doctor. Can you imagine? Patrick turned around and saw the bloodshot eyes of Mario, staring at him like a bull. Yes, we already know this freak, Mario rudely threw at him. I didn't understand, Patrick. Am I speaking unclearly? Can't you understand that approaching my woman and her daughter is forbidden to you? Don't you have your worries? Why don't you go and save your pensioners and drunkards from heart attacks? However, Patrick was also not a pushover and was not going to endure insults from this loafer so easily, even though he had a high opinion of himself. That's right. I work in an ambulance and I'm proud of it, he calmly replied. And why do you allow your woman to lie here and wait for death calmly? Lisa has told me that she has an incurable form of cancer, according to some incomprehensible doctor. But I, as a real doctor, strongly doubt it. It seems to me, Mario, that you are deliberately waiting for her to die, and you want to get access to her money through her daughter. You are just a scammer. Mario instantly turned crimson, starting from his towering head and ending with his thick fingers on his hands. The man slowly began to step on Patrick, while he did not flinch, waiting for the enemy to come to him at the closest distance possible. Patrick, Mario, Lisa exclaimed, trying to verbally separate them from her last strength. What are you doing? Shame on both of you. Lisa, I saw the other day how Mario behaved terribly with Amy, and I'm not certain, forgive me for being frank, that this person will be able to become a worthy parent for her after your death, which I very much hope will not happen. Shut up. Notwithstanding, Mario snarled at Patrick. What the hell are you even doing here? What? Wanted to get all the money for yourself? At that moment, a bewildered Amy ran into the room, carrying a small tray with 2 steaming cups of tea in her hands. Oh, the girl exclaimed, seeing the distorted face of her stepfather. Amy, leave here quickly, don't listen to them. The mother exclaimed, and her worries about the little child brought color to her pale cheeks for a few minutes. She struggled to sit up in bed. Mario, what are you saying? She asked him. Is it true what Patrick said about you and Amy? Did you seriously dare to shout at my child? Feeling that the argument was about to turn into something terrible, Amy carefully left the room, leaving the tray with tea near the door, and quickly went up to her room and locked the door. Lisa, my sunshine, of course he's lying, growled Mario, looking at the guest. Let's have you lie down quietly and rest. Why do you need extra stress? And I'll handle this scoundrel now. As soon as he finished the last sentence, Mario immediately pounced on Pat. However, the ambulance doctor, although he did not look like an athlete, was far from weak, as it might have seemed at first glance. In his spare time, Patrick was fond of gymnastics. He did 40 pull-ups and even knew some techniques from Eastern martial arts, so he never had any problems with his muscular corset. Grabbing the bulky Hulk by the shoulders, Patrick, like an avid torero, skillfully managed to bend him thanks to the force of inertia towards his knee, after which he delivered a quite tangible blow to Mario's eye. However, he was also ready to fight to the end, and so he literally lifted Patrick off the ground. But the paramedic easily slipped out of his steel grip, delivering several powerful blows to the scoundrel's abdomen. Stop it! Enough! Lisa shouted at them. However, the men just moved further away so that she wouldn't accidentally get hurt. They fought for a couple of minutes with all their might, and when Patrick began to win decisively, Mario preferred to retreat with the words, "You'll still answer for everything, you scoundrel. I won't let it go. Keep in mind my guys will find you quickly, and your puppy too. You won't be able to gather your bones later. I swear by my life. Just try it." Patrick promised him in a cold voice, "I can call the police right now. Prove later that you didn't threaten me." Mario tried to leave the room, and at that moment he stepped on the very tray with hot tea that Amy had left. What the hell? His cry could be heard by Lisa and Patrick. Oh, you little mutt. It seems that at that moment Mario scolded his leg. Mario, Lisa said his name threateningly and with genuine indignation in her voice. It seems that everything Patrick said was true. How could I have been so wrong about you? Get out and never show up in Amy's life again. You're a fool, Lisa, he spat in her face. And you'll die alone. Do you think you are still needed by anyone other than me, sickly and with a child too? You should be grateful that I am willing to look after your girl. And now with these words, the unfortunate man waved his hand at her, and Patrick, and limping and holding on to his scorded ankle, left the house. "Oh," Lisa sobbed after him and grabbed her chest. She slowly sank back onto the bed. "Are you okay?" Patrick rushed to her. "I'll take you to the hospital." During Lisa's absence, Patrick took her daughter to his home. Max was pleased that Amy could stay with them for a while until her mother recovered. Patrick immediately went to see the woman after she received the necessary help. First of all, he asked her treating doctor if it was true that she had cancer. "Of course not," the doctor confidently replied. "Patrick, I don't even understand how this person was able to so cloud her mind that she refused to visit the family doctor. She really had some problems with her stomach and heart, but all of this is treatable. How much skill was required to manipulate the woman so that she would be convinced of her imminent death?" "That's what I thought," Patrick nodded. "It's scary to imagine what could have happened to the little girl if Lisa was really gone. By the way, why was she so sure of this?" The doctor squinted, reviewing the conclusion. "Not without reason yet. In her blood, we found a potent heart medication that could cause sudden cardiac arrest if the dose was preceded. Apparently, this scoundrel regularly put medicine in her food or water so that the effect he needed would come as soon as possible." Patrick clenched his fist with force. "Don't worry, the worst is already behind us." His colleague patted him on the shoulder. "Patrick, you practically saved this patient's life. If it weren't for your intuition, who knows how it could have ended?" To be honest, Patrick didn't even think about it. From the shock he had experienced, he did not even immediately remember that he wanted to ask Lisa if she ever had a sister. After all, Max's mother died 7 years ago, and now he needed to solve the mystery of this old secret. Later, when Lisa was on the mend, Patrick explained the whole situation with Max and his mother to her. "Lord, but I've always been sure that I was the only one from my parents." Lisa was shocked to her core. Returning home from the hospital, she immediately broke off all relationships with Mario. As she later told Patrick, she met Mario on a dating site, and he quickly gained her trust and was able to charm her. Apparently, when he found out about her money, this cunning plan matured in his head. Fortunately, this scoundrel will not bother Lisa anytime soon. Taking the doctor's conclusion about the attempted poisoning, she wrote a statement to the police, and the investigation was in full swing. She also hired the best private detective in town, who was able to find out that Lisa and her sister Julia were once admitted to an orphanage together. However, the cunning director, Vever, wanting to extract more benefits from the twins, placed them in different families. "When you were born, your parents were wealthy but unfortunately childless," the detective told Lisa when they met in his office. "The Robins dreamed of having a child all their lives, but they were never able to have their own. They tried all possible options until they finally decided to turn to the orphanage. They even paid the director to speed up the adoption. From the moment the documents were submitted until you were placed in your new family, it only took a couple of days." "That's amazing," the woman agreed. "And what happened to my sister?" Lisa asked. "Unfortunately, life was not as kind to her as it was to you." The detective sighed sadly. Julia McCarty was adopted by a new family but was returned by her unfortunate parents after just a few months. She lived her whole life in the orphanage and worked the toughest jobs. But I must say, she still hoped for something better." "Really?" Patrick asked bitterly. The detective nodded. He discovered that Max's biological father of the boy apparently left Julia and the child almost immediately after his birth. However, the woman still remained optimistic. She planned shortly before her death to invest heavily in repairing her old Buick in order to then work on it as a taxi. "Oh my God," Lisa whispered. "Just think how much inner strength my sister had." By bitter irony, on the day of the accident, Julia was driving the car to the car service, the detective continued. She took the little one with her simply because there was no one to leave him with. And unfortunately, that terrible car accident happened. Patrick felt depressed and shattered, but he still found some comfort in knowing that Julia saved her life, albeit difficult, but managed to remain a decent and good person until her very last breath. Patrick thanked God for allowing him to save Lisa and her daughter. Thus, he was able to atone for his guilt before little Max for not being able to save his mother from death. It took some time after all this turmoil, and Lisa and Patrick realized that they felt something much deeper for each other than just gratitude. Lisa was able to trust her heart to Patrick, and 6 months later, the couple got married. Lisa and Patrick loved each other so much that they couldn't spend a day apart at first. When his wife announced that she was pregnant, Patrick felt like the happiest man on earth, and when their daughter was born, they unanimously named her Julia. "I'm so happy for you, Julia," Patrick said.